What if I told you that one of the most reliable leafy greens ever grown doesn't need warm soil, doesn't need replanting, and doesn't disappear after one season, but was quietly pushed out of mainstream agriculture anyway? What if I told you this plant thrives where spinach struggles, grows in cold soil when most crops stall, and returns year after year without permission, fertilizer schedules, or seed catalogs? And what if I told you that for centuries, this plant wasn't a novelty or a garnish? It was a staple, grown deliberately, harvested repeatedly, used by physicians, farmers, and households as a dependable source of early-season nutrition when little else was available. Yet today, it's treated as an afterthought, a weed, a curiosity, something you might stumble across in an old gardening book but rarely see in modern growing guides, grocery stores, or nutrition advice. That contradiction matters, because when a plant is this resilient, this nutritious, and this self-sustaining, and still disappears from public awareness, it raises a question that can't be answered by taste or convenience alone. This wasn't forgotten because it failed. It was sidelined because it succeeded in ways the modern food system doesn't reward. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what this plant is, why it was systematically discredited and marginalized, and who benefited from steering generations away from it. This channel exists to examine everyday systems that shape how we live, eat, and think, using evidence, history, and economics, not surface narratives. We are truth-driven and fact-based. We follow the money. We expose what was buried, ignored, or quietly replaced when it became inconvenient to powerful interests. Nothing here relies on rumor or outrage. Everything is grounded in documented history and verifiable incentives. Subscribing is not about supporting a creator. It's about preserving access to uncomfortable facts in a media environment that increasingly rewards silence over scrutiny. The plant in question is sorrel, specifically common garden sorrel, Rumex acetosa. This is not about trends, politics, or culinary fashion. This is about documented agricultural history and biological reality. Before you dismiss sorrel as a sour herb or a specialty green, understand this clearly. What you were told about its value is incomplete. For centuries, sorrel was cultivated intentionally across Europe, Asia, and parts of North America. It was relied upon precisely because it grows when spinach fails, early spring, cold soil, short days, and because it returns on its own year after year. Its disappearance from mainstream cultivation was not a coincidence. It was the result of systems that favor annual dependence over perennial reliability. Sorrel's value begins with its biology. Unlike spinach, which is sensitive to soil temperature and day length, sorrel activates growth at low soil temperatures, often below 5 degrees Celsius. This makes it one of the earliest edible greens available after winter. Nutritionally, sorrel provides vitamin C, historically crucial for preventing deficiency during winter to spring transitions, vitamin A precursors, supporting immune and epithelial health, iron and potassium, essential for blood oxygenation and cellular function, organic acids, including oxalic and malic acids, which stimulate digestion and bile flow. Those organic acids are key. They interact directly with digestive and metabolic systems, increasing mineral absorption and supporting liver function. This is why sorrel was historically used not just as food, but as a restorative spring tonic. Functionally, sorrel competes with acid-suppressing digestive products, synthetic vitamin C supplementation, early-season leafy green supply chains, and it does so without fertilizers, annual seed purchases, or controlled environments. Sorrel self-seeds, spreads modestly, and persists. It is cheap, scalable at the household level, and extremely difficult to monopolize. That combination is precisely what made it undesirable to industrial agriculture. If sorrel is so cold-tolerant, nutritionally useful, self-renewing, and historically trusted, why did it vanish from mainstream gardens, farming advice, and food systems? Why was it reclassified from staple crop to culinary footnote? To answer that, we have to move through history carefully, step by step. Medieval period, 1700 sorrel was a common kitchen garden plant across Europe. Medical texts referenced it for digestion, fever reduction, and spring weakness. It was intentionally planted near dwellings because of its reliability. 1700s, 1800s sorrel became part of standard agricultural rotations. It required no replanting and minimal care. Naval and military diets included sorrel-based dishes to prevent nutrient deficiencies. Late 1800s industrial seed companies began expanding markets for annual crops. Spinach varieties were standardized, branded, and promoted because they required repeat purchases and controlled inputs. Early, mid-1900s agricultural extension services emphasized uniform annual vegetables suitable for mechanized farming and centralized distribution. Perennial greens like sorrel were excluded, not banned but ignored. Key losers if sorrel spread, widely commercial seed producers, fertilizer-dependent growing models, seasonal produce, distributors, no law outlawed sorrel. It didn't need to be criminalized. It was simply made economically irrelevant by systems that rewarded dependency. The shift required narrative reinforcement. Sorrel was labeled too acidic, old-fashioned, unrefined, potentially harmful in excess. Language mattered. Risk was emphasized without context. Benefits were minimized. Culinary media framed it as niche, medicinal, or ornamental rather than foundational. Meanwhile, spinach was framed as modern, safe, and standardized, despite having similar oxalate content. This wasn't confusion. It was selective framing, repeated until it became accepted truth. The cost was not dramatic, but it was real. Early season nutrition gaps, increased reliance on imported produce, small gardens lost resilience against cold springs, traditional food knowledge eroded across generations, communities that once fed themselves with perennial greens became dependent on annual supply chains. Nutritional independence narrowed. No arrests were necessary. Control was achieved through omission. Modern research confirms what history already showed. Sorrel is safe when consumed as part of a normal diet. Its nutrient density rivals or exceeds spinach in early season conditions. Its oxalate content is comparable to many mainstream greens in regions where sorrel has been reintroduced. It performs exactly as described: early, reliable, and persistent. Every major reason given for its marginalization collapses under scrutiny. The beneficiaries are clear. Seed companies selling annual varieties, industrial farms optimized for uniform harvest cycles, distributors dependent on predictable seasonal turnover, perennial, self-seeding crops disrupt those incentives. They reduce dependence. They decentralize food production. That is why change remains slow, even when evidence is clear. This was never about safety. It was never about taste. And it was never about nutrition. It was about control, predictability, and profit. You are not uninformed by accident. You were guided, quietly, towards systems that require constant replacement instead of renewal. Sorrel didn't disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it worked too well outside the system. Do not take this at face value. Look up historical planting guides. Compare nutrient data. Grow sorrel yourself and observe what happens in cold soil when spinach hesitates. Then ask a simple question. Who benefits when resilient, self-renewing food sources are forgotten? If this kind of examination matters to you, engage. Comment. Share findings. Support spaces where uncomfortable facts are allowed to exist. Truth doesn't announce itself. It survives quietly until someone chooses to look.